metal chair scraped loud against the concrete floor. Rasheed stared at the man in the cheap gray suit sitting across from him. The lawyer, Davis, pushed 2 manila folders across the table. One was thick with bank routing numbers and wire transfer receipts. The other held a single sheet of paper stamped with the state seal. "She emptied the primary accounts yesterday," Davis said, keeping his voice low. "The house in Buckhead was signed over to a shell company last week, and she gave the prosecutor the affidavit they asked for. The warden just signed the order. You aren't leaving this place. Not this year, maybe not for a decade." Rasheed didn't yell. He didn't hit the table. He just reached for the folder with the parole denial. He turned it over to look at the attached evidence Tasha had submitted. But what Rasheed found would change everything. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also tell us in the comments where you are watching from: New York, Florida, South Africa, maybe Canada, England or Jamaica. We want to know. Rasheed ran his thumb over the notary stamp on the bottom of Tasha's affidavit. The document claimed Rasheed had hidden offshore assets during his initial trial and had threatened a key witness named Jimmy Cole. That piece of paper was the only reason his early release was revoked. "Look at the date next to the stamp," Rasheed said. Davis leaned forward and adjusted his glasses. October 4th. "The feds didn't even talk to Jimmy Cole until October 12th, Rasheed said. "I know because Jimmy called me the day they showed up at his shop. Tasha had this paper drawn up and notarized a full week before the threat was even supposed to have happened. She pre-signed it." Davis stared at the date. He pulled a pen from his pocket and tapped it against the table. "She got sloppy. She wanted the timeline to match the wire transfers so she could clear the accounts while you were locked in here." Rasheed looked past his lawyer, watching a guard walk the length of the visitation room. Tasha was always terrified of going back to the duplex on 4th Street, where they started. That fear drove every decision she made. When the indictment came down on Rasheed's logistics company, she decided right then she wouldn't be the loyal wife visiting him through glass for 10 years. She wanted the money, and she wanted a clean break. She didn't just want him in prison. She needed him completely neutralized, so he couldn't freeze the assets. "If we take this date discrepancy to Judge Harper," Davis said, "he throws the affidavit out. Harper hates false evidence in his court. It makes him look bad." "How long?" Rasheed asked. "If I go directly to his chambers today, he could reinstate the original release order by this afternoon. You'd process out before the night shift comes on." "Do it quietly," Rasheed said. "Don't file it through the main clerk. If Tasha gets an alert from the system that my status changed, she'll put the money on a plane and disappear. She thinks I'm dead in the water. Let her keep thinking that." Davis nodded, packing the folders back into his briefcase. He stood up and knocked on the metal door for the guard. An hour later, Rasheed stood in the yard. The midday sun baked the concrete. He waited in line for the payphone, feeding a prepaid card into the slot when his turn came. He dialed a number he had memorized years ago. Elias picked up on the second ring. "Tell me." "Davis is going to Harper right now," Rasheed said. "The paperwork was forged. I should be walking out tonight. I ran the property records on the shell company, like you asked," Elias said, his voice crackling through the static of the prison line. "She moved fast. The house is sold. Cash deal. She booked a private charter out of DeKalb Peachtree Airport for tomorrow morning. Flight plan says Antigua. She thinks she has everything," Rasheed said. "She has the operational cash," Elias corrected him. "She drained the domestic accounts. It's about 4 million. She packed it up." Tasha liked things orderly. She planned her life in strict increments, but she didn't know Rasheed never put the primary holdings in his own name. He placed the commercial real estate and the bulk of the wealth in a trust controlled by his grandfather's estate, managed by Elias. The accounts Tasha drained were the decoys. She took the bait. "Let her pack," Rasheed said. "Just have a car waiting for me at the gate." 30 miles away, in the master bedroom of the Buckhead house, Tasha dragged a strip of clear packing tape across a heavy cardboard box. The plastic squealed against the cardboard. She cut the tape with a pair of scissors and pressed the edge flat. The room was almost entirely bare. The king-sized bed was stripped of its sheets. The walk-in closet, usually organized by color and season, echoed when she walked into it. She grabbed the last stack of cashmere sweaters and shoved them into a leather duffel bag. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. She walked over and checked the screen. It was Vance, the broker who helped her set up the offshore routing. She answered on speaker. "The final transfer cleared," Vance said. The funds are sitting in the St. John account. You are completely liquid. And the flight? Tasha asked. She opened her jewelry box. Fueled and waiting for you at 6 a.m. Tasha ended the call. She looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She didn't feel guilty. Rasheed brought the federal investigators to their front door with his corner cutting. He risked her safety and the lifestyle she spent 15 years building. She refused to be collateral damage in his downfall. She earned this money by covering for him, by sitting at dinners with politicians and pretending everything was fine, while he scrambled to hide his mistakes. She picked up a velvet pouch and dropped her diamond tennis bracelet inside. She pulled the drawstring tight. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She walked down the curved staircase to the main floor. The movers had already taken the antique furniture, leaving only indentations on the hardwood floors. She walked into the kitchen and grabbed a rag. She turned on the faucet, soaked the rag, and began wiping down the marble island. She was abandoning the house in 12 hours, handing the keys to a faceless corporation, but she couldn't stop her old habits. She scrubbed a coffee stain near the sink until the marble was perfectly white again. Her phone chimed with a text message from her own lawyer. Order finalized. He's doing the full sentence. Have a safe flight. Tasha threw the wet rag into the sink. She walked to the front window and looked out at the long, empty driveway. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. She had won. She had engineered the perfect exit, leaving no loose threads, no angry husband to chase her down. She walked over to the stack of leather bags sitting by the front door. She arranged them in a neat row, making sure the straps were tucked in. Everything was ready. The release process took exactly 3 hours and 14 minutes. Rasheed stood in the intake holding area, in the clothes he wore the day he surrendered. Gray slacks, a white button-down collar, no tie. The slacks hung loose around his waist now. The property officer slid a clear plastic bag through a gap in the security glass. It held his steel watch, a leather wallet, and a dead smartphone. Rasheed signed the ledger. The heavy metal door buzzed loudly and swung outward. He walked through a small vestibule, pushed open a second glass door, and stepped onto the public sidewalk. The humidity hit him immediately. A dark blue sedan idled at the curb. Elias sat in the driver's seat. Rasheed opened the passenger door and got in. The vinyl seats cracked under his weight. He rolled the window down a few inches to let the air circulate. Davis came through, Elias said. He pulled the car away from the curb and merged onto the access road. Rasheed pulled his dead phone from the plastic bag and tossed it into the cup holder. Elias reached into his jacket and handed him a new device, already activated. Tasha's flight is confirmed for 6 a.m., Elias said. She secured the $4 million. She packed her bags. She thinks that's the ceiling. Rasheed looked out the window at the passing highway signs. $4 million was a lot of money, but it was just operating capital for his regional trucking fleet. It was the visible money. When they got married, Tasha insisted on managing the household accounts and the lifestyle budget. She wanted her name on the Buckhead deed, the country club memberships, the visible markers of arrival. Rasheed let her have all of it. He signed the papers she put in front of him to keep the peace. But he kept the commercial distribution centers, the actual engines of his wealth, shielded in a trust originally drafted by his grandfather. Tasha never asked about the zoning permits in South Fulton or the raw land holdings. Dirt, concrete, and freight didn't impress her friends. She only looked at the numbers on the bank statements she controlled. She filed the wire transfer under the shell company, Rasheed said. What happens when she tries to move it from St. John to her final account in Antigua? That's her blind spot, Elias said. The domestic accounts she drained were cross-collateralized with the commercial leases. When she zeroed them out, it triggered an automatic audit on the business side. The bank flagged the sudden withdrawal this afternoon. Since she used a forged power of attorney to authorize the wire, the fraud department locked the receiving account in St. John an hour ago. The money is frozen. She just doesn't know it yet. Tasha sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of the empty living room. She ate a salad from a plastic container, the only thing she bought from the deli down the street. The quiet of the house was absolute. The movers had even taken the rugs, leaving the acoustics harsh and hollow. Every scrape of her plastic fork echoed off the bare walls. She kept her laptop open next to her on the floor. The banking portal showed a zero balance for the joint accounts. It gave her a sharp, practical sense of satisfaction. She did the math in her head again. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of hosting dinners for men who looked down on Rasheed, cleaning up his public image, making sure they looked like they belonged in this zip code. 4 million was severance pay. She clicked over to the email from Vance. Funds deposited. She didn't bother trying to log into the St. John account itself. Vance handled the security protocols and the secondary routing. She just needed the confirmation. She stood up and threw the plastic container into a black garbage bag hanging from the kitchen island handle. She walked upstairs to the master suite. Her 4 leather bags sat in a row by the bedroom door. She unzipped the smallest one and pulled out a stack of loose photographs she had found in a drawer earlier that day. One photo showed Rasheed standing in front of his first loading dock, wearing a stained safety vest, smiling. Tasha looked at it for 2 seconds. She dropped it into the bathroom trash can. She didn't burn it or tear it up, she just threw it away like an old receipt. She walked to the security keypad by the bedroom door and punched in her code. The green light flipped to red. Armed, she set 3 alarms on her phone and lay down on the bare mattress pad. Elias parked the sedan outside a 24-hour diner off Interstate 20. They went inside and sat in a back booth under a flickering fluorescent light. Rasheed ordered black coffee and a plate of eggs. He hadn't eaten anything since breakfast in the mess hall, but he ate slowly, chewing each bite carefully. "Do you want me to call the police?" Elias asked, keeping his voice low. "She forged a federal document to keep you locked up. She stole $4 million. You can have her arrested at the airport." Rasheed put his fork down on the ceramic plate. "If she gets arrested at the airport, she blames the system. She blames me for the initial indictment that put the business under a microscope. She goes to trial, she plays the victim, she pays a lawyer to write a narrative where I manipulated her into doing it. So we just let her go? I want her to walk out of that house tomorrow morning thinking she won," Rasheed said. "She likes to control the environment. She likes to be the one who decides when things end. I want to look her in the face when she realizes she trapped herself." Rasheed drank his coffee. He thought about the day Tasha bought the Buckhead house. She walked through the front doors and immediately started listing everything she would tear down and replace. The fixtures, the cabinets, the flooring. She didn't care about the foundation, she only cared about the surfaces. She viewed their marriage exactly the same way. When the surface cracked, she grabbed what she could carry and ran. "What time does her car service arrive?" Rasheed asked. 5 a.m., Elias said, checking his watch. "Cancel it," Rasheed said. "I'll pick her up." The alarm on Tasha's phone chimed at 4:15 a.m. She swiped the screen before it could sound a second time. The bedroom was entirely dark, save for the faint orange glow of the street lamps filtering through the uncovered windows. She sat up on the bare mattress pad. The air in the house was stagnant. The movers had taken the air purifiers, the fans, the heavy curtains that usually insulated the room from the Georgia humidity. She walked into the master bathroom and turned on the vanity lights. She splashed cold water on her face, patting it dry with a paper towel she brought up from the kitchen. She dressed deliberately. A beige cashmere turtleneck, black trousers, and flat leather loafers. She wanted to look like an executive traveling for business. Airport security paid less attention to women who looked annoyed and expensive. She grabbed the leather duffel bags and carried them downstairs one by one, lining them up by the heavy oak front door. Tasha walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was completely empty except for a single bottle of sparkling water. She drank half of it and threw the glass bottle into the recycling bin. She stood at the marble island and pulled her passport from her handbag. She flipped to the photo page, verified it, and slid it back next to a thick manila envelope containing $10,000 in emergency cash. She felt no sentimentality about leaving. She considered the money in the St. John account a delayed payment for damages. 2 years ago, federal agents had come through the front door at 6 in the morning. They tracked wet dirt over her imported rugs. They pulled the lining out of her jewelry safe and dumped her tax records onto the dining room table. She spent weeks fielding passive-aggressive questions from her neighbors and dodging calls from the country club board. Rasheed brought that chaos into her carefully ordered life. He assumed she would stand by him, pack a modest bag, and downgrade to a smaller house while he fought the charges. He misunderstood who he married. She didn't sign up for the trenches. She built the fortress, and if the fortress was compromised, she was taking the bricks. At 4:55 a.m., Tasha picked up her phone to check the status of the black car she had booked to take her to DeKalb Peachtree. The app showed no active reservations. She tapped the screen, thinking it was a glitch with the wireless network. The screen reloaded. The reservation list was empty. She found the dispatch number in her email and dialed. A man answered on the third ring. typing loudly on a keyboard in the background. "I have a car scheduled for 5 o'clock in Buckhead," Tasha said. "The app isn't showing my driver." "Name on the account?" the dispatcher asked. "Tasha Vance." More typing. "That reservation was canceled at 11:30 last night, ma'am." "I didn't cancel it," Tasha said, keeping her voice level. "Rebook it. I need a car here right now. I have a 6 o'clock flight." "I don't have any drivers in that zone right now," the man said. "The earliest I can get a car to Buckhead is maybe 6:40. Tasha ended the call. A sharp spike of annoyance hit her. She opened a generic ride-sharing app. The screen showed a single car 10 minutes away. She booked it immediately, opting for the premium service. She grabbed the house keys from her pocket, set them on the kitchen island, and walked to the front door. 10 miles south, Rasheed drove Elias's dark blue sedan up Interstate 85. He kept the speedometer locked at 65. He hadn't driven a car in nearly 2 years, and the physical sensation of the steering wheel under his hands required his full attention. The smell of stale coffee and Armor All in the cabin was sharp and real. He took the Lenox Road exit and drove into Buckhead. The transition from the highway to the residential streets was abrupt. Gas stations and concrete overpasses gave way to tall oak trees, manicured hedges, and long driveways hidden behind wrought iron gates. Rasheed hated this neighborhood. He bought the house because Tasha circled the listing in a magazine and left it on his desk. He paid the mortgage, but he never felt like he lived there. It was a showroom. He navigated the winding streets from memory. The sky was still pitch black, the neighborhood entirely silent. Wealthy streets were always quieter. He turned onto their block. At the far end of the cul-de-sac, the exterior floodlights of the house were burning bright white. Rasheed pulled the sedan to the curb 3 houses down and shifted into park. He left the engine idling. He watched the front porch. The heavy oak door opened, and Tasha stepped out. She carried 2 leather bags, setting them on the porch, before turning back inside to grab 2 more. She closed the door behind her. She didn't lock it. She just pulled it shut and dragged the bags down the brick steps to the edge of the driveway. Rasheed watched her check her phone, look down the street, and check her phone again. She was waiting for the rideshare. She looked exactly the same as the day he went to trial. Immaculately dressed, posture rigid, checking her watch. She controlled the schedule. Everything ran on her time. Rasheed took his foot off the brake. The sedan crept forward, the tires turning quietly against the asphalt. He didn't turn on the high beams. He drove the length of the street, pulling parallel to the base of the driveway. Tasha saw the headlights sweep across the lawn. She picked up the 2 heaviest bags, hoisted them onto her shoulders, and started walking down the concrete slope toward the street. Rasheed shifted the car into park. He didn't cut the engine. He reached for the door handle, pushed the heavy metal open, and stepped out into the humid morning air. Tasha stopped halfway down the driveway. Her boots clicked once against the concrete, and then went completely still. She dropped the duffel bags. They landed flat against the ground with a dull thud. Rasheed walked around the hood of the sedan, closing the distance between them. The streetlights overhead cast a pale yellow wash over his white button-down shirt. "You're in prison," Tasha said. Her voice didn't shake. It stayed low, hard, and clipped. "You're supposed to be in the state facility." "The judge looked at the date on your affidavit," Rasheed said, stopping a few feet from her. "He realized you didn't wait for Jimmy Cole to make a statement before you swore it was true. He threw the revocation out." Tasha looked past him, scanning the empty street for a police cruiser, an attorney, anything that explained how he got here. There was only Elias's sedan idling at the curb. "The flight is at 6, she said, her eyes returning to his face. "You missed your window to stop anything. The transfer went through. I am leaving." Rasheed pointed to the front porch, right behind her. "Go ahead. Try to log into your account right now." Tasha reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen. She opened the banking app, her thumb moving with practiced speed. She entered her passcode. The screen hung on a loading wheel for 3 seconds before a red banner popped up across the top. "Account locked. Security hold." She tapped the transaction history for the St. John routing number. The $4 million sat there, completely visible, but stamped with a bold warning. "Frozen pending investigation." "You used a forged power of attorney to clear the joint accounts," Rasheed said. "The bank flagged the zero balance dump yesterday afternoon. They caught the transfer before it cleared the clearinghouse. The money didn't leave the country. It's sitting in a frozen holding account, waiting for the signature of the primary holder." Tasha stared at the phone screen. The red text stayed put. She looked back up at Rasheed, her jaw tight. You set a trap. I let you take the decoys, Rasheed said. I let you pull every cent out of the accounts you managed, so I wouldn't have to argue with you about what was mine and what was yours. You packed your bags. You thought you outsmarted the system. You lost the business, she said, her voice rising slightly, the professional composure finally cracking at the edges. You brought the federal agents here. You brought the mess to this door. I had to protect myself. I didn't spend 15 years building this life just to watch you throw it away over bad paperwork. You didn't protect yourself, Rasheed said. You ran the second things got uncomfortable. You signed a false affidavit and put my name on it, so you could steal $4 million and fly to Antigua alone. A pair of headlights cut across the intersection at the top of the cul-de-sac. A small white sedan turned onto their street, slowing down as it looked for the house number on the curb. It was the rideshare driver Tasha had ordered 10 minutes ago. Tasha looked at the approaching car, then down at her 4 leather bags sitting on the concrete. She looked back at Rasheed. She realized there was no clever legal maneuver left, no offshore routing number that could save her, no attorney who would touch a forged federal document. The rideshare car pulled up to the curb behind Elias's sedan, its hazard lights blinking an amber pattern against the dark pavement. The driver rolled down his window and stared at them through the windshield. Tasha looked at the car door, then back at Rasheed standing between her and the street. She didn't pick up her bags. She didn't ask for help. She turned around, walked past the open bags, and climbed the brick steps of the porch. She grabbed the handle of the heavy oak door she had pulled shut 20 minutes ago. It didn't open. It was locked from the outside. She stood there on the porch, her hands empty, looking at the smooth wood of the door. Rasheed didn't follow her up the steps. He stayed by the edge of the driveway, watching the rideshare driver turn off his hazard lights and idle quietly into the morning. Thank you for joining us for this story. What did you think of Tasha's exit plan, and how would you have handled things if you were in Rasheed's shoes? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next video.